Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Darwin's Journey, which is a 1 to 4 player Euro strategy board game designed by Simone Luciani and Nestor Mangoni. This one you're looking at around an hour and a half to 2 hours to play on average. Now before I get started on my thoughts on Darwin's Journey, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so I've just finished a 2-player game of Darwin's Journey here. Now, rather than doing my normal format of going through all the rules and mechanisms and then reviewing, what I think I'm going to do is I am going to kind of share my thoughts as I go along and explain each part of the game. So you can see here, the board is fairly it's quite daunting. There's quite a lot going on here, but once you boil it down to each of your actions and what you can do, it's not as bad as it looks. But this is a worker placement game where you are essentially trying to discover these species. You are traveling on these islands and getting bonuses as you go. You're going along this kind of river track here with your boat. You are upgrading your workers as you go on your personal player boards, achieving short-term objectives. You are kind of tailoring your strategy towards these long-term objectives. And again, it all held together through this worker placement system. So in this game, you are going to start with 4 workers. So what would normally happen is that they would go on these spots here, and you can see here that they have these tracks next to them which show their skill sets. So they're going to start on pretty much only having one skill each, which are tied to these cards that you start with at the beginning of the game. Now, if you ever upgrade these skills by collecting these seals as you go, you can potentially unlock these bonuses. But that's quite difficult to do. You'll probably only get 1 or 2 done throughout the game, but it's an option there should you want it. Now, you can see here that all these seals come in different colours and different icons, and they all tie to different actions on the main board. So let's take a look at the actions you can do. So in a 2-player game, chunks of these actions are kind of held together by these books, which means the first time you go to one of these books is going to be free for you, but as soon as another player or yourself goes to one of those books again, then you're going to have to pay a placement fee, and that again changes on the player count. So I think in a 2-player game it's 3 coins, in a 3 or 4-player game it's 2 coins, and in a 3 and a 4-player game these spots will be kind of divided up further so that there's not as much crossover when it comes to having to pay placement fees. So the top one here is going to be how you move along these islands. So you're going to start with a basic action here by placing them on these lenses, which comes with a bonus of moving 2 with your little adventurers here. So you're going to start with an adventurer on one of these islands, but as you progress your boat along the track, which is another action you can take, you can potentially start exploring other islands as well. And there's a lot of things you need to consider on these islands. So, for example, if you stop at certain spots, you can get money. Money in this game is generally quite tight. You can land on these kind of species tokens, which lets you put one of these little research icons on your personal player board. So you can see here that I discovered these 5 species throughout the game, which again will tie to another action. You can get these kind of wild knowledge tokens, which let you kind of take wild actions. You can land on these tent spots, which will give you bonuses. And the sooner you go to them, the cheaper it is. And they come with quite a nice little bonus there. And it will let you deploy more tents on the board, because you can see here on this little tent spot, or on your player board, you have these tent spots where as you deploy them, you get further bonuses. And different things like that, such as getting bonus actions, getting points, and so on. And as you go on, the bonuses generally get better, getting pure points at the end of it. Now you can also see here that under each of these action spots, you have these unlocked spots, these locked spots, which means you have to go to another action here. You're going to have to pay a fee, which is linked here, and then you're going to put one of your personal worker placement spots that look like this in your colour onto them, which is basically an improved version of that action. So you can see now that if someone was to go here, they can move 3 spaces with their adventurer, but you're going to have at least a skill level of having 2 of these kind of cartography icons. So again, the more you skill up your workers, the better actions you have access to, but you're going to have to unlock the worker placement spot in the first place. The next one here is the sail action, which we've mentioned already. Again, you can improve them as you go. Now, this is a kind of a mechanism that ties everything together, because you need to push along to actually gain access to these other islands, but it also, there's an incentive to keep up with the HMS Beagle here, because each round is going to go from spot to spot. And if you fall too far behind, you can risk losing points on these end of round objectives. So you can see here in the first round, we had an objective to get, well, we get 4 points for each one of these seals we have on our player board, or for each one of our own worker placement spots, we would get 5 points. Each one of these seals would get 4 points, and so on. Each bird we've researched and each stack of stamps we've unlocked. But again, if you fall too far behind, you're going to add up your points and minus any kind of points here that you've fallen behind these checkpoints. So it's very important to keep up with the HMS Beagle. You've got the stamp spot here, which lets you deploy these stamps from your personal player board. So they would normally be stacked up here, and as you deplete a stack, you get more bonuses. And they will basically be a minor area control part of the game where you're putting your stamps down, and if you are the majority person to have the most stamps, or the second most in each of these different areas, then you are going to get these bonuses, such as getting wild tokens, more money, and bonus actions, etc. And you can see here that these are modular, so game after game you'll get different tiles to play with. You have this one here, which lets you collect new seals for your personal player board, and they come with fees. So the first row here is free, and if you want a very particular one that's not anywhere else, you can end up paying 3 coins to grab that one. And again, you're going to place them on your player board and upgrade the ability of your workers. The more you place, the more bonuses you get, such as getting these wreaths here, or these laurels, or end game points. Now those laurels are useful, the gold and silver ones, because if you have a worker that's unlocked those, when you take any kind of action, you're going to get another little bonus, such as getting discounts, or getting stronger actions, or even doing kind of drive-by actions when you do when you explore with your adventurer. So for example, normally you can only get a bonus where you land, but if you have that laurel, you can take the bonus on the way as well. You've got the traditional take the first player marker here, where you get some bonus coins. You can gain these objectives, which are kind of short-term or longer-term ones, depending on the difficulty of them. Like you got the silver and golds. The golds are generally a bit more difficult. Like for example, I want to have these 2 seals, and I want to have 3 worker placement spots of my own. But you can actually just reserve these and deploy them once you've completed them, and you're going to put them on these spots on your board here, which will give you new kind of engine building benefits, or instant bonuses, such as taking these wild seals. And this seal mechanism is really cool, because you can tailor your workers to what you want them to do, and whether you want to make them a jack of all trades, or you want to make them tailor-made for a certain action spot on the board. And these do tons of different things, and they're all generally quite interesting, such as getting tent bonuses again, not having to pay for seals, getting further up on the book track, which we'll talk about later, just endgame points, not having to pay as much when you share a spot with somebody else, and stuff like that. Now let's talk about this spot here. So this is where you are going to add these research tiles onto this grid here. Now, if you have researched this particular type of animal that's not been placed yet, you can go to this spot and you can ship off the tile to the board here. So let's just say I had this one. I'm going to place it on here. And then you're going to have a look at every space, either vertical or horizontal, to the one you've just placed. And if there's a tile already there, you are going to go up the track here, which is very important for end game points. But for every empty slot, you are going to get a coin. And because at the start of the game, this is going to be obviously emptier, it means that the front-loaded part of the game, you are going to end up getting more coins, but as the game goes on, you're going to be pushing up this track, which is pretty, a nice little way that the game tilts in terms of its tempo. You have this one here, which simply lets you allow to research an animal already being delivered to the grid there, and you could want to do that because of certain objective tiles or stuff like that. And you have these special worker placement spots, which are again completely variable. They change from game to game, and they are normally pretty powerful, but the requirements to use them is much higher. Like for example, if I have 2 of these seals and 2 of these seals, I could make 2 movements and 2 sell actions, or even like get like a wild seal each time without having to pay for it. So again, these are very versatile and very useful, and as normal, you'll get an even better version if you have those gold or silver seals. We've already talked about this spot here, where you can place new worker placement spots of your own colour. And that's pretty much what you're doing. So you are juggling all those things, trying to research these animals, get them down, get your money up, climb the tracks, because this track here is important, because at the end of the game, you're going to get 2 points plus, sorry, you're going to add up 2 with every completed row on this grid here and multiply it by how far you are up on this book track. So this is going to be a significant chunk of your points. And if you neglect this, you are probably going to regret that. After every person has played or placed all their workers, you're going to go into a bit of an admin phase where you recalculate the first player. You're going to fill in the gaps of all the taken seals here, making them cheaper. You are going to calculate the bonuses based on the seal majorities and lose half of your stamps there, rounded up. And you're also going to progress the HMS Beagle and score the relevant round bonus points there. And after 5 rounds of that, you're going to add up all your points with your position on the Theory of Evolution track here, and the player with the most points will be the winner. Okay, so hopefully that gave you an idea about how the game plays. Apologies if that was a bit rushed, and there's a lot to cover here. But despite there being a lot going on, I think it is actually quite digestible when you play the game, because your options are generally limited to move your adventurer, move a boat, place some stamps down, gain some new seals, that kind of stuff. So it's not actually overwhelming in what you actually do, but the potential to kind of combo these actions together is quite high, which is generally an aspect of Eurogaming that I enjoy. This game does that very well. Like, for example, you might have the majority on one of these seals there, which gets the stamps here, which gives you more movement. The movement might let you place a tent down. The tent lets you get a tent placement action and lets you take some bonus actions, maybe depleting your stack of stamps, which gets you another action. So you can really string these things together and have long, rewarding turns where you feel quite powerful. I already briefly talked about the seal system here by upgrading your workers. This is a really neat part of the game, and to have those super workers, you need to invest quite a lot of time and money, but it does pay off because you get those reef bonuses and you get all these end game points as well. But it adds another kind of wrinkle to the gameplay because it's all about how you're going to use these workers. Do you want to waste your best worker on an action that's not really his skill set? Do you want to have more kind of jack of all trades and that kind of stuff? So I really do like the way that you have to tailor these abilities to do certain things you want to achieve. Like, if you really wanted to utilize one of these worker placement spots here, you're going to want to have 1 or 2 workers with those skills. Whenever I talk about a worker placement game, it's always important to me that there is a good degree of turn angst and that urgency to get to a certain spot. This game has that in spades. It is very important that you prioritize your actions or forfeit a lot of money, because money in this game is fairly tight. It's not cripplingly tight, but you definitely do have to consider it quite carefully, and you can't be just frivolously wasting it because it's going to come back and haunt you. And you do need it to do quite a lot of stuff. Of course, to place more workers, you're going to need it to place more worker placement spots, which is fairly expensive. You're not going to get a ton of these unlocked throughout the game unless you maybe specifically aim for that. But you can see here that there's still a lot of locked spaces here that we were yet to explore, which I actually don't mind because it means that I don't tend to like games where you can get everything done. I do think there's a fantastic blend of tactical and strategic decisions here, because there's long-term strategy, there's relatively short-term strategy when it comes to fulfilling these tiles. They're really useful because they're not terribly difficult to achieve, but they give you fantastic bonuses. And some of these are going to be pretty much mandatory. You really want to be paying less when you are sharing spaces with everyone else. There's even another worker you can unlock, and these even come with points bonuses. So if you really want to focus on getting these short-term objectives done, then you can do that. But at the same time, you need to be considering your long-term strategy to push up this track here, because again, that's a big chunk of points there you're missing out on if you don't do that. And even there's a ton of points available here when it comes to these end of round objectives, because again, if you're missing out on that, especially the bigger ones like this one here where you depleted your stamps, that's potentially like 24 points available there, because you can do it up to 3 times. And if you fall too far behind on the boat track, that's going to cost you more points from that. So again, lots of things to consider here and lots of viable paths to victory, which I like. The variability of the game is fairly high, and there's a lot of modular parts on the game, such as the stamps majority areas. You've got the special area slots here. These are all completely modular. The end of round objectives are modular, and that will definitely change the tempo of the game, because you might want to forfeit some to do some bigger ones later. You've got the cards that you're drafting at the beginning of the game. They're different as well. So just enough here to keep things fresh. Normally, a personal issue with games of this magnitude for me is that it takes a lot of effort to do the housekeeping and upkeep of the game. That is certainly not the case with this one. When it comes to the end of your worker placement phase, it's actually really easy to keep the game moving. You just kind of fill in the gaps and move the boat along and just do some minimal admin. So it's nice that you stay engaged in the game and you're not having to always refer back to the rulebook to see what order we do things, which procedure do we follow. It's actually pretty intuitive and keeps ticking along nicely. The scalability of the game is good. Personally, I would reserve this to game nights where I have 2 or 3 players, just to keep that time frame down a little bit more. And I imagine the game, I've not played this at 4 players yet, but I imagine if you played it at 4 players, the tightness of the game is going to be a little bit squeezed, because of course there are the same amount of spots there. I've also not tried the solo mode. I'm not a solo gamer, so I can't testify about the quality of that one either. The production for the game is generally fantastic. Now, I do have the Deluxe Collector's Edition here, so there are some components that have been upgraded, such as these kind of plastic rubbery effects seals here. These are really nice. They look good when they're on your player board. They slot in there nicely. You have got the dual layer boards here. You've got these nice little glass beads to show the species you've researched. Everything slots in very nicely. It's nice and snug. The artwork is great. It's got a good table presence. Yes, a little bit overwhelming to start with, but it does quickly become digestible, and you can break things down quite simply. If you've got the metal coins, they are absolutely brilliant, real high quality pieces there, nice bags and stuff. So yeah, this has all the bells and whistles without overdoing it too much. So yeah, in terms of production quality, pretty much faultless, to be honest. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Darwin's Journey. So I've been eagerly anticipating this game for probably around 2 years now, because I backed it when it first came out, and I know there's been some delays and things. And I was a little bit apprehensive because my tastes, maybe over the last year, have steered a little bit away from these more advanced Euros into the more medium to medium lightweight Euros. And I thought, is this going to still be my tastes? Is it going to be a bit too much going on for me nowadays? And I'm really pleasantly surprised to say that was not the case. And it really kind of, reignites some passion for these styles of games, because this game does what it does to a very high standard. And considering there is so much going on here, it is, again, very intuitive, and it doesn't feel like there's any part of the game that's tacked on. I was a little bit concerned that maybe the stamp majorities might feel a little bit extra. That wasn't the case. This is actually a really viable part of the game, or a very strong part of the game, and I enjoyed it a lot. I like the way that the workers get upgraded. I've not actually got a game that does this, where you have bespoke workers for different jobs. It all just clicks together and just, again, all comes together in a very harmonious way. Now, I must say the game doesn't do anything tremendously new. In fact, I think every part of the game has been seen in an existing game before, but that's not to its detriment. I think it does what it does to a really high standard. There's lots of viable paths to strategy, lots of inviting decisions at all times, and prioritizing them is important, because, again, everything's going to come with a cost if you don't get there soon enough. And yeah, it's just lots to explore, and it's always like a bit of a buffet of options at all times, where everything feels like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, but I've not got enough time to do it. And those 5 rounds do tick along at a pretty rapid pace, and I do love the way that there are some big combos that come together here. And even just little design elements, such as the research grid here, where at the start of the game you are getting money by placing these things down, and as the grid gets more and more filled up, those spots become more interesting, because you want to push up the book track here to start getting those huge multipliers. But yeah, it's a very nice game. It's definitely my cup of tea, and it's as good as you'd expect with a game designed by a master such as Simone Luciani. So this is without a doubt going to get a chairman's commendation. I'm really looking forward to playing it some more at the different player counts, and maybe even starting to inject some of the expansion material that comes into this one, because there is quite a lot of it that comes with the collector's edition. But the gameplay itself is rock solid. It's a hell of a lot of fun, and I would be pretty surprised if this isn't going to be in the top 2 or 3 kind of advanced Euro games of the year. It's got it's set a very high bar for other games to try and improve on, I suppose. But yeah, these are my final thoughts on Darwin's Journey. It's wonderful.